Praised be Jesus Christ. Welcome to day 5 of our novena to Our Lady of Mount Carmel. And on this feature, I want to focus on Our Lady in her visitation. The theme, the overarching theme of the novena pilgrimage to the summit of Mount Carmel this year is Behold the Beloved, seeking the face of God with Mary. How do we see the Beloved at work in the visitation? What does the Lord have to share with us in shining the light of his face upon our lives? We are all made for relationship, for connection, for bonding, and a sense of belonging. We all need one another in order to become who we are created to be. We can't do that in isolation. No man, no person is an island. We need the relationships of what brings out our identity, our true self. Ultimately, that is God alone. But as human beings, we're social creatures. We can't do it alone. God does the essential part, but he needs instruments to bring it all about. We can't rely on ourselves and live in isolation. We see Mary, after her experience of God's beauty in her soul at the Annunciation, in silence and solitude in the secret garden of her inmost heart. She stood there and she abided there, resonating with this tremendous grace that God was giving her to experience in herself. And the seed that God planted was an inspiration to go and see her cousin Elizabeth, who lived in a far off land. It would have required a tremendous journey to get there. Sacrifice, risks, challenges. And despite all of that, she trusted that if God was asking, he was going to protect and provide. He would prepare the way. And so she left with haste, with zeal, with zest, with eagerness and enthusiasm, filled with the life of God, full of grace. And she goes off, and the moment she shows up, God starts to make himself known. The moment she greeted Elizabeth, by the voice and word of Mary, is filled with the Spirit of Jesus. And in her womb, John the Baptist, the greatest of all prophets, exalts, magnifies the Lord, dances for joy in the presence of God, in the way that David danced in the presence of the Ark of the Covenant. John the Baptist is dancing in the presence of the Ark of the New Covenant, who contains in her womb the fulfillment of God's promises to Abraham, who contains in her womb the bread of life, the root of the, what is that called? The root of Jesse that was in the Ark of the Old Covenant. Now we see Jesus, the fulfillment of the Messiah. We see Jesus, the fulfillment of the law given to Moses, and who came to give us a new law. Jesus says, I give you one commandment. My commandment is this: love one another. And we see Mary fulfilling this commandment as the first evangelist to share the gospel, to share the presence of Jesus, who is the gospel. And she just shows up. All she has to do is show up, and God starts to act. God starts to work and move. And as she does so, Elizabeth confirms in her what God had done in the hidden hiding place of her house at Nazareth and in of her heart. Elizabeth is confirming externally what God did in secret in her spirit. She says, blessed are you among all women. Who am I that the mother of my Lord and my God should come to me? And she said that, she prophesied this, all generations shall call you blessed, She prophesied that she is blessed among women. Filled with the Holy Spirit, she spoke those words. It came from the Holy Spirit that she honored Mary. Oftentimes, when God plants a seed of inspiration in our soul, in calling us to act, in calling us to take action and to go, to do something specific. It could be a little nudge, a little clue. It could be a whisper. It could be a shoulder tap, something subtle and gentle. And when we are obedient to those inspirations of the movement of the Spirit, trusting that it is the Holy Spirit and it's not another spirit not of God, trusting that it's not just our own motivation or our own subconscious needs that we're not awake to, and we confuse that with the Holy Spirit. When it's truly the Holy Spirit nudging us and calling us on, and we obey that call, we find that what we seek to do in the service of God to help someone else ends up blessing us in turn. Oftentimes, we might end up being more blessed than the persons that we intended to serve and to assist and to help. We may find that it was only by being obedient to this subtle inspiration and the hiddenness of our heart that we were able to allow God to speak to us in a new way through someone else. We may find that it was only by taking the risk and making the sacrifice to go out of ourselves for someone who was in greater need than us, in a spirit of generosity and courage. It was only by doing that that the Lord could do something new in our life. It was only by leaving the comfort of that silence and solitude and intimacy with God, hidden in hiddenness. It was only by putting that aside and going out of ourselves in the name of the Lord, because being moved by Him, that we were open to a new manifestation of Him. And ultimately, the motive is love. Love is active. Love is a verb, an action word. Love is more than something or a feeling. It's somebody. It's God in our midst, Emmanuel. And we are called to discover the holiness of that, the sanctity of that. God in our midst, in the midst of friendship and relationship that are wholesome and healthy in alignment with God's will, that are genuine and good and healthy. It's in these kind of relationships, not in the toxic ones or others that are motivated by intentions that are not in keeping with God's desires. But when we are in a good relationship, the book of Proverbs says that to find a friend is to find a treasure. Someone that can journey with us and help us to discover who we are meant to be, our own self-worth, our own dignity, and affirm and validate that reality. We all need people like that in our lives, and the fact of life is, it's hard to come by. My father has always said, if you have, towards the end of your life, not when you're in an early part of your life, not when you're a teenager, when your friends are your world, but it's so often we detach from our family and our friends become our life as teenagers, or even for some people in their 20s and 30s. And that's a beautiful thing, but it's only through having gone through trials and challenges that when our lives are purified by fire, that's when we discover who our true friends are. That's what we discover. We can discover and discern and distinguish between the gold and what's phony. We're called to have hearts of gold, to be true friends of God, and to become for others who Christ has been for us. Friendship with God is meant to make us capable of genuine friendship with other people, where that is compatible, where God is calling us to create that quality of bonding that will be for His glory alone. And when we do that with the intention of His will, not our own, that is what blesses us most. That becomes one of the greatest instruments for God's grace in our life, a friend. May God grant us the grace of true friendship. May God put good friends in our lives that can fortify our faith and strengthen our friendship with God. May our Blessed Mother be the instrument of this, and above all, help us to grow in love, in loving one another according to the will and wisdom and power of God.